Okay, third graders, here come chapters 3 and 4 from our book Indian Shoes. You've probably noticed by now that this book isn't like a novel that goes from beginning to middle to end. These are like short stories gathered together in one place. So every chapter is its own story. All right. So let's start with chapter 3. It is called Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? A cut pine glowed in crimson bubble lights. Flames danced in the fireplace. A newly arrived card from Jonah and Nancy Lee stood among those gathered on the mantel. Frosty webs clung to the window panes, and the wind groaned against the rooftop. This was the first Christmas Day that Ray and Grandpa Half Moon hadn't celebrated with family in Oklahoma. But last week, the pickup had quit for good. Just as well, Grandpa had said, what with the roads so slick. While riding the rattling train home from church, Ray had promised himself to act merry anyway for Grandpa's sake. Snow swirled around Ray and Grandpa Half Moon as they waded through the drifts beneath the ice-sculpted maples to the Murphy home. Glittering snowflakes smacked wet against Ray's cheeks and clouded the mourning, that's like the morning grieving midday sky. In the Murphy family kitchenette, Ray said Merry Christmas to Prince, who yipped and tripped over his paws and slipped on the linoleum. Ray searched for the biscuit box while Grandpa escorted Prince onto the back step to do his business. When it was time to leave, Ray rubbed Prince's belly and said, "It's tough being alone on holidays." Ray's and Grandpa's breath puffed cloudy as they trudged next door to the Wang home. In the driveway, Mrs. Wang's VW Bug waited to be freed from the snow like a triceratops skeleton embedded in rock. Inside Mrs. Wang's home office, Grandpa said, "Good tidings," to Tank, who snoozed in his shell, and to Eugenia, the parrot, who replied, "Feliz Navidad." While Grandpa spied on Tank, Ray refilled Eugenia's seed mix and offered her a farewell cookie. "Poor Eugenia," Grandpa said, tugging his forest green knit cap over his ears. "Tank's lousy company this time of year." "Bye, Eugenia," Ray said, pulling on his wool-lined mittens. "Joyeux Noël," Eugenia chirped. Ray and Grandpa tromped 2 doors down to the Onsi home. Sleet caught in Grandpa's shoulder-length ponytail, and Ray's teeth clattered like old bones. In the Onsis' living room, Ray wrinkled his nose and said, "Happy holidays" to Mama Ferret and her kittens. Mama Ferret and her kittens, who slinked below the plush L-shaped pit sofa. "Kind of smelly, aren't they?" Ray asked, unwrapping his scarf. "Yep," Grandpa Half Moon replied. Here's the picture of Ray with Mama Ferret and some of her kittens. So baby ferrets are called kittens. Ray cleaned the litter boxes and refilled the food and water bowls. Meanwhile, Grandpa flipped the feather toy until the ferret family emerged to tumble and play tag. But one kit wouldn't have any of that. The runt raced back and forth with chow in his teeth, snatching it from a bowl and hiding it beneath the sofa. "Poor Mama," Grandpa Half Moon said. "She sure has her paws full." Ray and Grandpa slid through the slush across the street to the Wilson home. layers of cotton and flannel and denim and down weren't enough to still their shivers or keep the goosebumps from rising on their skin. Inside Mr. Wilson's studio, Grandpa said, "Season's greetings" to Legs, who blinked at him with 8 eyes. Ray gave her crickets to munch, while Grandpa served up a juicy earthworm. Legs gnawed the squirmy worm first. "I'm partial to Legs," Grandpa Half Moon said. "She has a beautiful soul." The sky deepened to murky twilight as Ray and Grandpa shuffled back to their brick bungalow. Ray's lungs ached from the frigid air, and the wind whooshed away the crunchy boot prints he and Grandpa left behind them. In front of their toasty fire, Ray sipped steaming cocoa, while Grandpa sank into his warm recliner and clicked on the evening news. Ray watched stories about Santa, soup kitchens, and ice skaters on State Street. From O'Hare Airport to Lakeshore Drive, the storm blanketed Ray's steel and stone city in glistening white. Entire blocks had lost power, and repairs lagged hours, even days behind. "Check on your neighbors," the reporter warned. "Cold can become deadly fast." Though memories of Aunt Wilhelmina's pecan pie, Uncle Leonard's hearty chuckle, and the Elvis Christmas CD haunted Ray, at least he had the glow of the crimson bubble lights, the steam of the cocoa, turkey roasting in the kitchen, and Grandpa for company. Could be a lot worse, Ray thought. Just as he swallowed his last sip of cocoa, the TV screen and ceiling fan bulb flickered off. The bubble lights died, dulling the pine tree, and the gurgling heater fell silent. Grandpa climbed out of his recliner, strode to the window, and peered outside. "Street lights out," he said. "I'm guessing the whole block at least." "The pets!" Ray exclaimed, moving to his side. "What about the pets?" Grandpa Half Moon slung an arm around Ray's shoulders. "We can't very well build a fire at every home on the block, but let's see how we're faring first." Ray trudged after Grandpa into the shadowy, cramped kitchen and watched him take a pan of half-cooked turkey legs out of the oven. The plastic packages of frozen okra and rice pilaf were still blocks of ice in the freezer. The brownies were still powder in a box. No road trip, no Aunt Wilhelmina or Uncle Leonard, and now no holiday meal. It was the worst Christmas ever, but all Ray could think about was Prince, Tank, Eugenia, Mama Ferret, her kits, and Legs. "Too bad their families left them all alone," Ray grumbled, setting his empty mug next to the sink. "Too bad the pets can't just come over here." Right then, Grandpa Half Moon's eyes crinkled, and Ray grinned for the first time all day. "Why not?" they asked together. It took Ray's wooden sled, Grandpa's squeaky wheelbarrow, 2 oversized beach towels, and a couple of the pet's own zip-up carriers. It took some ruffled fur and feathers and leg hair and nerves. It took more than an hour of wading through the drifts beneath branches draped by icicles and listening to Eugenia chirp, "Mele Kalikimaka," which meant Merry Christmas in Hawaiian. But finally, Tank the turtle, hibernating in his aquarium, Eugenia the parrot, chatting on her swing, Mama Ferret and her kittens, tumbling in their cage, and Legs the tarantula, sauntering in his giant plastic skull, had settled in the Half Moon family room. Prince, the fox-faced Pomeranian, curled on the matted shag carpet in front of the fireplace. To Ray and Grandpa Half Moon, the giant marshmallows scavenged from the cabinet, roasted over the flames, tasted charred and chewy and sweet. And even though the blizzard was blustering, the bubble lights had died, the turkey legs were ruined, the pickup had puttered out, the road trip was canceled, and the rest of their family had gathered miles away, Christmas suddenly seemed like Christmas. Ray laughed at the frolicking ferrets. Like rats, but funny, he said. More like polecats, Grandpa said, downing a marshmallow. How about you pick out a kit? I told the Onsies we'd take one of those smelly ferrets if that suits you. It did. Ray noticed the ferret runt, eyeing his marshmallow. From now on, Ray planned to keep watch for swiped treasures beneath the couch. I'm going to call him Bandit, he announced. Thanks, Grandpa. Merry Christmas, Grandpa replied, and then Eugenia squawked, Happy New Year! The end of the chapter called Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. We're going to read chapter 4. Now it's called The Accident. It's a little longer story. Okay, so settle in for chapter 4. Grandpa Half Moon's hand felt sure on Ray's shoulder, guiding him down the cracked sidewalk from school toward their red brick bungalow. That afternoon, the bus stop looked run down. The trash can band banged rat-a-tat-a-ka-plop, and Annie's children's bookstore was closed for remodeling. But Ray didn't mind. He was too excited. It's an art contest, he told Grandpa, for all the kids in the city. The 3 big winners' pictures are going to be hung up in the window of a store on State Street. Grandpa grinned. I guess that means you'll be entering. Maybe I'll win a blue ribbon, Ray said. We could take the L train to see my picture and maybe grab some hot dogs. Your mama loved to paint, Grandpa said. She'd paint the side of a barn or a barn on a canvas. Then he promised Ray that they'd get some hot dogs, win or lose. Ray held out his hand to seal the deal, and Grandpa shook it. After finishing up his math homework, Ray decided it was time to paint. Bandit the ferret perched on Ray's shoulder, watching him dip the paintbrush in a Dixie cup of clear water. Ray had placed one of Grandpa Half Moon's moccasins on the bookshelf beside his antique desk. He stared at it a few minutes and then moved the brush wand to cover the bristles with brown paint. Before long, Ray had created a blob on his paper. He squinted at it this way and that, wondering if the blob could pass for a shoe. Just then, Grandpa shuffled into the room in his slippers and plaid pajamas. Not noticing his own moccasin, he remarked, My, that's sure a fine potato. Ray turned off his brass desk lamp, scrambled under his woolly blanket, and tried not to show his hurt feelings. He knew Grandpa would have never said anything to make him feel bad on purpose. Ray just couldn't paint like his mama had. After Grandpa had kissed his forehead and shuffled out, Ray listened to the rain whisper against his stained glass window. It's okay, he thought. I've got until Friday. The next day after supper, Bandit hid a stinky sock behind the bookshelves as Ray sharpened his pencil, set out a cup of water, and placed a fresh sheet of paper on his antique desk. Searching for inspiration, Ray spotted a book titled Dinosaur. He flipped through until finding a potato he liked, or not a potato. He flipped through until finding a photo he liked. And then carefully sketched a fierce T-Rex. It didn't quite look like the skeleton shown in the book, but Ray could tell what it was. That's no potato, he thought, dipping the bristles of the paintbrush into the water. Ray's book said that some scientists thought dinosaurs came in bright colors, like the lizards of today. The idea struck Ray as a good one, and he traced the pencil outline in bright orange paint. Better, Ray thought. I'm getting better at this. Excited, Ray plopped the brush back in the Dixie cup, turning the water bright orange. Then he rolled the bristles in red paint to fill in the T-Rex's form. The second the brush hit the paper, Ray knew he'd made a mistake. Too much water. We know what that's like, don't we, guys? I know I've done that so many times. I bet you have too. Red paint puddled in the middle of the dino body, then streamed off in all directions. Using his brush, Ray tried to direct the flow, but it was no use. His fierce T-Rex had bloomed into a sunny marigold. He studied the flower as it dried. I'm not much of a marigold guy, Ray thought. On Wednesday night, Ray set up another Dixie cup of water and another fresh sheet of paper. Then he sketched a fiery sun, a towering oak, and a red brick bungalow with a stained glass window on one side and smoke coming out of the chimney. What does that remind you of, guys? What does that scene remind you of? When he dipped his paintbrush into the cup, Ray carefully used just the right amount of water. He cleaned the bristles between colors, stopping to change the water in his cup twice. Finally satisfied, Ray let the masterpiece dry under his brass desk lamp. Grandpa shuffled in, whistling long and low. You sure outdid yourself there. If those judges don't put a blue ribbon on that one, they don't know nothing. But you're running late for bedtime, so you get yourself into bed and I'll be your cleanup crew. As Grandpa tucked Ray beneath his woolly blanket, Bandit climbed up on the antique desk to see the masterpiece for himself. As he scurried toward the lamp, Bandit's tail brushed against the Dixie cup. It toppled, rolling, spilling, splashing, plummeting off the desk and onto the hardwood floor below. Murky water flooded Ray's newly finished painting. Colors swirled and darkened. The paper was soaked through. The fiery sun, the red brick house, and the towering oak tree vanished into a big, wet, splotchy, ugly, brown mess. Bandit! Ray exclaimed as the culprit escaped to the bookshelves. Here's the picture of the Dixie cup jumping over onto the painting. Grandpa Half Moon took off to the kitchen for paper towels, but Ray just sat up in bed and shook his head. When Grandpa got back, Ray said, "Now I'll never win." "What's that?" Grandpa Half Moon asked, wiping up the water that had spilled onto Ray's desktop. Ray pulled his blanket up to his chin. "I've got only one day left. I give up." Ray half expected Grandpa Half Moon to give him a pep talk. Instead, Grandpa answered, "Too bad. I sure was looking forward to that hot dog, win or lose. But I guess we won't be going downtown at all then." On Thursday night, Ray carried Bandit into the family room, filled a Dixie cup with water, returned to his own bedroom, and locked the door behind him. I've come this far, Ray thought. I might as well see it through. He wanted that hot dog, and he didn't want to disappoint Grandpa. As he set the cup down on his antique desk, rain began to whisper against the stained glass window. The shing sound made Ray settle down a bit and rethink how he wanted to go about putting together his contest entry. He stared at his ruined masterpiece, still sitting in the middle of his desk. The night before, Grandpa just hadn't had the heart to throw it out. Amid the dried brown puddle, Ray could see a bit of the gold of the sun, the red of the brick, and the green of the leaves. He set the painting to one side, then got out a fresh piece of paper. He glanced around the room and noticed that Grandpa's moccasin was still perched on his bookshelf. For a long time, his gaze shifted between the blank page and the ruined picture. Ray thought back to how he'd wanted to do a painting of one of Grandpa's moccasins. That way, he figured, it'd be kind of like the picture belonged to both of us. Then he took a sip of water from his Dixie cup and began digging through his desk drawer for the rounded scissors and a bottle of glue. I'm not going to show Grandpa when I'm done, Ray thought. I'll let it be a surprise. 2 weeks later, Ray and Grandpa took the rattling L train to State Street, stopped by a hot dog stand for lunch, and then joined the sidewalk crowd, gawking at the city's best kids' art, proudly displayed in a fancy-smancy department store window. Ray's entry wasn't a painting, it was a collage. That last night before the deadline, Ray had turned his ruined painting into something else. He'd used his rounded scissors to cut the painting into geometric shapes. With his pencil, he'd outlined the shape of one of Grandpa Half Moon's moccasins. Then he'd filled in the outline with multicolored shapes to create shadows and textures, to show how warm and strong the moccasin was, how it could make Grandpa feel like home. A dab of glue here and there, and suddenly Ray had created his entry. But that's not what made Ray smile. It was the way Grandpa pointed and yelled to the crowd, "That's my shoe! That's my shoe!" Everybody in the crowd looked down at Grandpa's boots, and they didn't know what he was yelling about, but Ray did. Even though his ribbon read third place, he felt like a first place winner. End of chapter 4.